My name is James. For 15 years, I've walked the concrete floors of Northwood Correctional Facility. I've seen men break, I've seen them find redemption, and I've seen all the different ways a soul can curdle behind bars. I thought I understood this place, the invisible lines of power, respect, and fear that hold it together. But I was wrong. I've held on to this story for years, a secret festering in the darkest corners of the prison. It didn't start with a shank or a riot, but with something far more dangerous, a laugh. The moment she laughed at me, I knew something was terribly wrong. That laugh wasn't just mockery. It was the spark that lit a fire in the warden that would burn everything down. I've spent most of my adult life inside these walls, but nothing could have prepared me for the storm that was brewing. It wasn't in the cells, but in the tangled, fragile web of an inmate's marriage. My job as a corrections officer put me in the middle of countless stories, but this one was different. It was raw, personal, and filled with a betrayal that cut deeper than any prison sentence. This is the story of a laugh that brought a king to his knees. The visiting room is a special kind of chaos, a place I thought I had figured out after 5 years on the job. The air is always thick with whispered conversations, the smell of cheap disinfectant, and the heavy weight of regret. But I had never seen a laugh ignite a firestorm. It was just a small, almost musical laugh from an inmate's wife. It seemed like nothing. But the second it hit Warden Thompson's ears, his face twisted into a mask of fury that just sucked the air out of the room. He didn't just get angry, he unleashed hell. And in that one instant, I knew that laugh wasn't innocent at all. It was a signal. A key that would unlock a story of betrayal so twisted, it reached the very highest level of power in the prison. To get why a simple laugh could detonate a man like Warden Thompson, you need to understand the players on the board. Our story really starts about 3 months earlier, in the quiet, steady rhythm of prison life, where everyone had a role to play. First, there was me, James. Back then, I was 5 years in, still green enough to think I could make a difference, but jaded enough to know the system is a grinder. It chews people up, inmates and officers alike, and spits out whatever's left. My job was simple: keep order. I was an observer, a ghost in a gray uniform, just watching the slow, painful dramas of other people's lives. I took pride in seeing things other people missed, the little shift in posture, the flicker in an eye that tells you a storm is coming. But the storm Clara brought was a Category 5, and it came with a smile. Then there was Michael, inmate number 734. Michael wasn't your typical con. He wasn't a gangbanger or a hustler. He was a former architect, a sharp, well-spoken guy who made one catastrophic mistake involving insider trading. He tried to save his failing company, crossed a line, and got hit with a 10-year sentence. Inside, he was a model prisoner. He kept his head down, worked in the library, and the other inmates respected him for his quiet smarts. He never caused trouble because his whole world was focused on one thing: getting back to his wife, Clara. His love for her was the sun he orbited. It was desperate, absolute, and, as it turned out, completely blind. And that brings us to Clara. To anyone watching, she was the picture of tragic devotion. She visited Michael every single week, never missed one. She was beautiful, poised, with this fragile elegance that seemed totally out of place in that grim visiting room. She would sit across from Michael, her hands pressed to the plexiglass, and tell him about the life he was missing. She was his rock, his link to the outside world, the only reason he could stand the humiliating head counts and lonely nights. But I watched her. When Michael wasn't looking, her eyes would scan the room with a cold, calculating look. The warm smile she had for him would vanish the second he turned away, replaced by an expression of deep, chilling boredom. It was all a performance, and she was a master. Finally, you have Warden Thompson. He was a man made of granite and rulebooks. He ran Northwood with an iron fist and a core belief in absolute control. The prison was his kingdom, and everyone in it was his subject. He was a stickler for the rules who would write up his own mother for an untucked shirt. To most, he was just a rigid administrator. He'd taken a strange, almost fatherly interest in Michael's case, often using him as an example of how to productively serve your time. He'd have these short, formal chats with Michael, offering what looked like encouragement. It was all part of the warden's image as a firm, fair leader. An image that was about to be shattered. These were the four corners of our story. A broken inmate, his devoted wife, a tyrant of a warden, and me, the officer who was about to watch the mask slip. The day it all blew up was a Tuesday. Tuesdays in the visiting room have their own energy. The weekend rush is over, and this tired sadness settles in. Michael and Clara were at their usual table near the back. I was posted by the door, doing my usual scan of the room, my eyes glazing over the familiar tears and pained goodbyes. Clara was telling Michael a story, her hands fluttering, her face lit up. She was talking about a new appeal, some breakthrough her lawyer was supposedly optimistic about. Michael was hanging on every single word, his face a mask of pure, desperate hope. He looked like a drowning man who'd just spotted a life raft. He said something quiet, probably about how much he loved her, how he couldn't survive this without her. She leaned forward, gave him that perfect radiant smile, and then she turned her head just slightly. Her eyes met mine across the room. And she laughed. It wasn't loud. It was a soft, private, musical little sound. But it was aimed right at me, and it was dripping with contempt. It was the laugh of someone sharing a secret joke where I was the punchline. It said, "Look at this pathetic man, look at this whole pathetic world. They think any of this is real." It was triumphant. It was cruel. And it only lasted a second. At that exact moment, Warden Thompson was making his usual patrol through the room. He was a good 50 feet away, his back half turned. But it was like the sound hit him like a punch. His shoulders went rigid. His head snapped around, his eyes locking first on Clara, then on me. The color drained from his face and was replaced by a deep, blotchy, terrifying red. This wasn't just anger. It was a raw, possessive fury I had never seen on any human face. A pocket of absolute cold formed around us. Time seemed to slow down. Thompson didn't yell. He moved. He strode across that room with a predator's speed. Inmates and their families pulled back from him like the tide. He didn't even stop at the table. He reached over, his hand clamping down on Clara's upper arm like a steel trap. She let out a little gasp of pain, her perfect mask finally cracking. "Warden, what are you?" "Visit's over," he hissed, his voice a low, venomous growl meant only for her. His knuckles were white. "Get out. Now." Then he turned his burning eyes on Michael, who was frozen with confusion and fear. "As for you, inmate number 734, you're done. Visiting privileges are suspended. Indefinitely." He didn't stop there. He barked into his radio, his voice shaking with rage. "I want number 734 back on his block. Full strip search. Toss his cell. He's going to the hole." "On what charge, sir?" came the voice over the radio. "Insolence. Conspiracy." "I don't care, just do it," he roared, loud enough for the whole room to hear. He all but dragged Clara to her feet and shoved her toward the exit, his face inches from hers, spitting words I couldn't make out. She stumbled out, her face pale with shock and something else, real fear. I just stood there, stunned, the sound of her laugh still ringing in my ears. The warden's reaction was way beyond excessive. It was unhinged. This wasn't about a prison rule. This was personal. Deeply, violently personal. In that moment, I knew two things for sure. First, that laugh was a loaded gun. And second, Warden Thompson had just shown everyone exactly who it was aimed at. The mystery had just been dropped at my feet, and I knew, with a sinking feeling in my gut, I was going to have to pick it up, and the days after, Northwood became a pressure cooker. Warden Thompson went on a rampage. He cut privileges facility-wide. Yard time was shortened, cell inspections became constant and ruthless. It was collective punishment, all to crush morale and show everyone he was still king. The inmates were on edge, the air thick with resentment. It felt like living on a fault line. But all I could think about was that laugh. It replayed in my head, over and over. A key turning in a lock. I had to know more. My curiosity was like a physical hunger. I started with Michael. After 10 days in solitary, he was a ghost. The hope I'd seen in the visiting room was gone, replaced by a hollow, haunted stare. I found him in the library, staring at a book but not seeing it. I tried to keep it casual. "Heard the warden came down on you hard. What was that all about?" Michael just shook his head, his voice raspy. "He's a tyrant, James. He's always hated me. He sees a man who had a life, and he can't stand it. He was defensive, his loyalty to Clara unshakable. He grabbed her. He had no right to touch her. She was just happy. We were talking about the appeal. She laughed. That's it. That's some reaction for a laugh, I prodded gently. He's trying to break me, Michael whispered, his eyes darting around the room. He wants me to give up. Then he said the words that blew my investigation wide open. He knows Clara is my lifeline. He's trying to cut it. She manages everything for me on the outside. My finances, my whole life. Everything. I asked him what he meant by everything. He explained that his family had left him a big trust fund, money he couldn't touch while he was locked up. The rules were specific. He was the only beneficiary, but control of it was complicated. He told me his understanding of it. If I die, or if I'm declared mentally unfit to manage my own affairs, control of the entire trust passes to my wife. To Clara. He said it with so much faith, so much trust. He thought it was a safety net for her. I saw it as a motive. A multi-million-dollar motive. I started digging, quiet-like. A favor here, a casual question there. I started with the visitor logs. And I found it. Clara's name, but not just on Michael's list. Twice in the last month, she'd been logged in to see a different inmate, some low-level guy in for parole violations. Both times, the visit was short and logged as legal counsel. Clara wasn't a lawyer. The entries were quickly fixed, blamed on clerical errors, but I'd seen them. Then I checked the warden's schedule. The man was a creature of habit. Every hour was planned. But after the incident, a new pattern showed up. Multiple private counsel meetings every week. No names attached. Just hours blocked off in the late afternoon, held in his office, a place more secure than the prison vault. He was meeting someone, and he was hiding it. The pieces were just floating there, disconnected. A trust fund. Fake visitor logs. Secret meetings. And a warden whose anger felt more like a jealous lover's than an angry boss's. I didn't have the whole picture yet, but I knew in my gut that Warden Thompson and Clara were connected. And Michael, the loyal husband, was nothing but a pawn in their game. I was standing on the edge of a conspiracy, and I was about to jump right in. For weeks, all I had were whispers and theories. I needed something solid. The chance came from the most unlikely place, the warden's own paranoia. In his mission to get control back, Thompson ordered a surprise, facility-wide contraband sweep. It was a massive operation meant to intimidate everyone. Teams of officers were put together to tear the prison apart, from cell blocks to the admin wing. By sheer, dumb luck, I was assigned to a team searching the lower-level admin offices, a maze of filing cabinets and dusty paperwork directly below the warden's main office. This was a once-in-a-career shot. The admin wing was usually off-limits during sweeps. But Thompson's order was top to bottom, and for a few hours, the normal rules were out the window. My team started its work, pulling out drawers, checking behind desks. I knew I didn't have much time. I had to create an opening. I found a small bag of contraband sugar stashed in a desk drawer far from where we were working. As my team leader went to log the find, I had my moment. I told him I'd finished checking the filing cabinets near the back wall. These cabinets were old, part of a system that was rarely used but held overflow from the main offices upstairs. I knew from a clerk that some of Michael's old intake files were stored down here. My heart was pounding. It was a total shot in the dark. I pulled open the drawer labeled with Michael's inmate number range. Inside were dusty, forgotten files. I flipped through them, my fingers clumsy with adrenaline. And then I saw it. A newer, cleaner manila folder, tucked in the very back, completely out of place. It had Michael's name on it. My hands were shaking as I opened it. It wasn't a letter. It was something so much worse. Inside was a draft of a formal psychological evaluation of Michael. It was filled with clinical terms, describing him as having increasing paranoia, delusions of persecution, and emotional instability. It was a clinical assassination, painting a picture of a man about to have a complete psychotic break. It recommended that inmate number 734 be considered for a formal psychiatric review to determine his mental competency. The signature at the bottom was from Dr. Evans, the prison psychologist known by everyone as the Warden's yes-man. But that wasn't the worst part. Stapled to the back of the evaluation was a small, folded note in Warden Thompson's sharp, aggressive handwriting. It wasn't addressed to anyone, but the message was bone-chilling. "This is the path forward," it read. "Keep pushing him." The solitary stint helped. "Get her to sign off on the petition once he's broken. We're almost there. Get her to sign off on the petition." Clara. The blood drained from my face. This wasn't just an affair. It was a cold, calculated plan. They were actively working together to destroy Michael. To push him over the edge, have him declared mentally incompetent by a puppet doctor, also Clara could seize control of his trust fund. The Warden's rage in the visiting room suddenly made perfect, terrifying sense. It was the anger of a conspirator whose partner got careless, whose perfect plan was threatened by a moment of arrogant carelessness. I stood there in the dusty silence, the note burning in my hand. This was it. The proof. I quickly took out my phone, my fingers fumbling as I snapped several clear photos of the evaluation and the Warden's note. This was a massive breach of protocol, something that could get me fired, maybe even thrown in jail. But I didn't care. I slid the file back where I found it, my mind racing. I had the what. I had the how. But I still didn't have the why. What was in it for Thompson? What was his endgame? And I knew getting that answer meant walking even deeper into the fire. Having proof is one thing. Using it is another. I was just one CO against the most powerful man in the prison. Going to internal affairs was suicide. They were all Thompson's guys. He'd bury me, shred the evidence, and I'd be out of a job, or worse. I had to get him off balance, create a crack in his armor that would draw some outside attention. To do that, I had to do something unthinkable. I had to use the inmates. In every prison, there's the official hierarchy, and then there's the real one that runs in the shadows. At Northwood, the top of that food chain was a lifer named Alvarez. He ran one of the most powerful gangs and commanded more respect and fear than the Warden himself. He controlled the black market, the information network. Nothing happened on the blocks without him knowing. Going to Alvarez directly would be stupid. But I knew an older inmate named Pops who worked as a janitor. Pops had been inside for 30 years. He saw everything, heard everything, and had somehow managed to stay neutral, which earned him respect from all sides. More importantly, I knew Alvarez trusted him. I found Pops cleaning a spill in a quiet hallway, away from the cameras. I didn't waste time. "Pops, I need to get a message to Alvarez. It's about Thompson." He didn't even look up from his mop. "Whatever you're selling, son, I'm not buying. Stay out of it." "He's setting up one of your own," I said, my voice low. "Michael, the guy in the library. Thompson and his wife are trying to get him declared nuts to steal his money." That made him stop. He leaned on his mop and finally looked at me, his eyes sharp. "That's a heavy accusation, officer. And inmate business ain't your business." "It is when the Warden is the one breaking the rules," I shot back. "Thompson is using his power to rob an inmate. That's a line that shouldn't be crossed. Even Alvarez would agree with that. The inmate code is a twisted thing, but it has rules. You don't prey on your own. And you definitely don't let the guards get away with it. I was counting on that. I didn't show him my proof. I just gave him enough. Tell Alvarez the Warden wants Michael's money. Tell him he's using Michael's wife to do it. Tell him Thompson is a predator in a uniform." Pop stood there for a long minute, then gave a slow, tiny nod. "I'll pass it along. But you be careful, James. You're playing with fire from both sides now." 2 days later, the prison changed. It started at breakfast. The mess hall was full, but it was dead silent. Hundreds of men sat at their tables, but no one ate. They just sat there, in perfect, silent unison. The work crews refused to leave their blocks. The laundry machines sat quiet. The phones went unanswered. It wasn't a riot. There was no violence, no shouting. It was a silent protest. A total shutdown of cooperation. It was a display of power, orchestrated by Alvarez, and it was more terrifying to the administration than any riot. It was a clear message to Thompson: "You have lost control. A prison that doesn't run is a warden's worst nightmare. Thompson was furious. He ordered lockdowns, threatened punishments, but nothing worked. The silence held. It was chilling. He was a king whose subjects had suddenly decided he didn't exist. And just as I hoped, it worked. A facility grinding to a halt gets noticed. Whispers turned into reports, reports into phone calls. By the end of the week, we got the news. The state's Department of Corrections was sending in an external review team. They weren't coming to investigate corruption, not yet. They were coming to figure out why Warden Thompson's prison had completely fallen apart. The crack in his armor had appeared, and I was ready to break it wide open. The arrival of the external review team sent a shockwave through Northwood. Suits with clipboards were everywhere. The prison was in a state of controlled chaos, with Thompson and his staff scrambling to pretend everything was fine. Security was a mess. Routines were broken. It was the perfect storm. I knew Thompson would be in damage control, trying to erase any trace of his dirty work. He'd be shredding documents, deleting files. I had my piece of the puzzle, but I needed the final, damning link. I had to know why a man with so much power would risk it all for an inmate's trust fund. The money was a motive, but it felt incomplete. There was a passion in his rage that money alone couldn't explain. I'd been planning for a moment like this. Weeks ago, I'd done a favor for one of the old, grumpy janitors, getting his nephew moved to a lower security block. In return, I'd gotten a copy of the master key to the admin offices. It was a huge risk, but I had a feeling it would be my only way in. My chance came on the second day of the review. The suits were touring the max security wing, and a staged fight broke out, another little gift from Alvarez. It was the perfect diversion. The call went out over the radio, all available personnel to D-Block. I heard Thompson's frustrated voice say he was on his way. This was it. His office would be empty. I moved fast, my heart hammering my ribs. The admin hallway was deserted. I slipped the key into the lock on the warden's office. It clicked open. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me. The office was immaculate, orderly, soulless. A big oak desk dominated the room. On it sat the warden's personal laptop. Open. Thompson was arrogant. He thought his personal devices were untouchable. I didn't have much time. I went to the desk, and my blood ran cold. He hadn't even closed his email. A draft was open on the screen. It was addressed to Clara. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures of the screen. I read the words as I did, and the final, sick piece of the puzzle clicked into place. It wasn't about strategy. It was a love letter. A desperate, angry one. It read, "Clara, what were you thinking? That laugh, that look you gave him. You were reckless. You almost exposed everything. We are so close. Once Michael is declared incompetent and the trust is ours, you can finally file for divorce. You can leave him, and we can be together. I'm tired of hiding this. I'll be retiring in 6 months with more than enough for us to disappear. I can't live like this anymore, seeing you with him, even if it's an act." That laugh in the visiting room, it was supposed to be a promise. Our promise. Don't ever be that careless again. It all came crashing down. The money wasn't the goal for Thompson. It was the means to an end. He was in love with her. He wanted Clara. The entire plan, the psychological torture of her husband, the conspiracy to steal his fortune, it was all just his twisted way of buying her. That laugh wasn't just a signal about their plan. It was a private moment of triumph between two lovers, right in front of the man they were destroying. And the warden's explosion? It wasn't the rage of a corrupt official. It was the jealous, panicked fury of a lover who saw his prize being reckless, threatening to bring their secret world crashing down. He wasn't mad that I saw her laugh. He was mad at her for letting me see it. I had the photos. I had the whole sordid story. I slipped out of the office, my mind reeling. I couldn't go to the review team directly. They wouldn't listen to a CO without verifiable proof. I had to light a fire they couldn't possibly ignore. That night, on my day off, I went to a public library in a town 30 miles away. I created an anonymous email account. I attached the photos, of the psych eval, the warden's handwritten note, and the damning email on his laptop. I wrote out a detailed, chronological account of everything. I sent it to 3 people: the chairman of the review board, the state's attorney general, and a bulldog investigative reporter known for exposing corruption in the prison system. I hit send. And then, I waited for the world to explode. It didn't take long. The explosion was swift and total. The reporter broke the story first, a bombshell article that landed like a grenade. Armed with the details from my email, the Attorney General's office immediately got a warrant. The external review instantly became a full-blown criminal investigation. This time, when they raided the warden's office, they knew what they were looking for. They seized his laptop, his phones, and his financial records. They found the encrypted app he used to talk to Clara. They found the love letters. They found the offshore bank accounts he was already setting up. The whole sordid affair was laid bare. Warden Thompson was arrested in his office. He was led out in handcuffs, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. The news ripped through the prison like wildfire. A strange, quiet feeling of victory settled over the cell blocks. The silent protest was over. The king had fallen. Clara was arrested the next day at her house. The image of her being led away, face streaked with tears, was on every news channel. Her carefully built world of devotion was obliterated. The trust fund was immediately frozen. Her grand plan for a life of stolen wealth had earned her nothing but a conspiracy charge and a future behind bars. The hardest part was still to come. It fell to me to tell Michael. The new acting warden agreed it should come from me. I found Michael in the library, where he'd been hiding out, totally confused by the chaos. I sat down across from him and laid it all out. I didn't spare him the details. I showed him the evidence, the emails, the plans to have him declared insane. I watched a man's soul break in real time. The betrayal was a poison that flooded his system. It wasn't just his wife. It was the warden, a man he had, on some level, looked up to. His world didn't just crumble, it turned to ash. There was no anger, no shouting. Just a deep, hollow silence that was worse than any scream. He just stared at the papers, his face completely empty, as the reality of being betrayed by the 2 people he trusted most in the world consumed him. My part in it all remained a secret. I was the ghost in the machine. No one ever knew I sent that email. I watched as Northwood began the slow process of rebuilding. A new warden, new rules, a fresh coat of paint on a rotten foundation. I had won. I had exposed the truth and brought down a corrupt tyrant. But it felt less like a victory and more like the end of a war, where everyone lost something, and in the quiet that followed, I had a lot of time to think. Warden Thompson was convicted on multiple counts of corruption, fraud, and abuse of power. In a perfect twist of irony, he was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, trading his warden's uniform for an inmate's jumpsuit. Clara took a plea deal, testifying against Thompson for a reduced sentence. She's now serving 7 years in a women's facility. Michael was granted parole a year later. The evidence of the conspiracy against him made it impossible to deny. But the man who walked out of Northwood wasn't the same man who walked in. The hope in his eyes was gone, replaced by a permanent, weary caution. He was free, but the betrayal had trapped him in a prison that bars and concrete never could. He was destroyed by the truth. I'm still a corrections officer. I still walk the same halls. But I see things differently now. I see the invisible prisons people build for themselves out of greed and lies. I brought down a corrupt warden and his lover. I delivered a kind of justice. But was it really justice, or was it just a more calculated kind of revenge? I exposed the truth, but doing so annihilated a man who had already lost so much. It's a question I still ask myself in the quiet hours of the night, when the only sound is the distant clang of a cell door locking. If this story left you speechless, do me a favor and smash that like button. I need to know you're out there. And I have to ask, Was what I did justice, or did I go too far? Let me know what you think in the comments below. This is the kind of story that sticks with you, and I want to hear how it hit you. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because the secrets I've seen behind these walls are darker than you can possibly imagine, and you won't want to miss what comes next.